I'm Lyle from the Outer Red Hands.
I'm Jeremy from the Outer Red Hands.
And welcome to our creature feature, where we look at a creature from legend, history, or pop culture, and we look at how you can incorporate them into your role-playing games.
Right.
So for this video, we're looking at clowns.
Right. So the origin of the word clown is Old English, and it means rustic, fool, or peasant.
Yep.
And there's also an Italian word.
Yeah, the Zanni, which means dispossessed immigrant.
Right.
So really emphasizing that they're an outsider.
Yes. So what we want to do is take a look at a few examples of clowns in history and kind of touch on some of the impressive or interesting points about them. The first clown that we want to look at is the ritual or sacred clown. This is a Native American tradition that follows the idea you need to laugh before you can pray. Mm-hmm. And so this is a contrarian clown that will behave backwards, that will do things opposite of what you would expect them to do. If it's hot, they put on clothes, they may walk backwards. And so it's a satirist. It's a clown that satirizes possibly the ideas of the chief, the ideas of the tribe, and kind of points out foolishness or points out someone that you may not want to agree with.
Now we see an example of this in the Lakota tribe, where the person doesn't directly say that that's a dumb idea or a bad course of action. What they'll do is to start to mimic that person who's suggesting that course of action, and of course mimicking them in an exaggerated or ridiculous way. Mm-hmm. So people perhaps will start to associate that with the actual person. And then ideally we'll see the course of action or the suggested course of action as ridiculous.
Right. And so you may think that this would create a violent reaction by some of the members of the tribe, but these
probably
clowns,
they wanted to.
Yes. Yes. These clowns, or this role, this sacred clown, is protected by the tribe. So it's a role that you cannot harm them, and what they say is spiritual, or it's sacred.
Right. That must have been really annoying. Stop that. Stop that.
Yes.
I don't do that. Yeah. But this is in quite a contrast with our next example, the jester. Mm-hmm. Now, whereas the sacred clown or ritual clown was protected from harm, the jester did not have such protections. In fact, the jesters were about almost as low as slaves. Mm. And we see a good example of how unprotected they were in 13th century Sweden with one law which said that if a jester was physically assaulted, the only recourse they had was to make a jest or to try to verbally humiliate that person. They couldn't, for example, physically assault them back or try to get them thrown into some sort of 13th century version of jail. Yeah. So what we have is a character that is in high society but of very low status. So it brings us to our second point about the jester, that they really had to walk a line. Mm-hmm. So that makes them the ideal diplomat, I suppose, but they have to be funny and entertain these people, but at the same time not cross the line where they would get attacked or killed. And
this is a much more physical type of clown, right? So you have
Absolutely.
Juggling and storytelling, things that, very much more from the previous type, the sacred clown.
So it brings us to our next point. They're a real jack of all trades. The tradition comes from the minstrel tradition or the storyteller tradition. So they were there to tell stories. They were there to tell jokes. Mm-hmm. But they were also jugglers and acrobats. So they really did it all. Unlike our next clown, which is the Harlequin. Now, the Harlequin relied more on pantomime. So they were masters of acrobatics. Now the Harlequin has probably our favorite background or possible backgrounds, because we don't actually know the origins of the Harlequin. But one idea is, this point, the Wild Hunt. And the Wild Hunt, we're familiar perhaps with the German tradition, but they come from the French version of the Wild Hunt. So, demons or undead warriors that would ride out at night doing all sorts of things that demons and undead warriors do, I guess.
Right.
I'm sure it's more than just riding out at night. Yeah. Another idea for the Harlequin, or the possible origins for the Harlequin, is that they come from the French Passion plays as the demon or devil characters.
Right, so a creature of lusts.
Yes. And both great appetites, both lusts and gluttony. So that's how the Harlequin started. Mm-hmm. They started to become a more romantic figure. So which brings us to our next point. So of all the clowns, they're the most romantic. And they would partnered with someone who is more of a buffoon, or more what we consider a classical clown.
Right.
The Puero. So we had the more sophisticated and romantic Harlequin paired up with the foolish clown.
Right. And so that tradition seemed to be kind of turned backwards in the American circus tradition or American clowning, because you had the Pierrot, the white clown, the pantomime clown, becoming the more sophisticated clown, and the next type of clown, the Auguste clown, or what you would commonly know as the circus clown, the wig and the big nose, the big shoes. So this type of clown was often paired with the white clown, but became a soloist, had a singular role eventually in American circus and clowning tradition. And they, of course, had the exaggerated features, but they were also associated very much with children. I guess because, circus is the entertainment.
Or did they associate themselves with children? Work their way in there. Yeah.
Right. So the circus audience, comprised of a lot of children. So you have that connection, clowns visiting hospitals, clowns as children's entertainment. They have, wallpaper with clowns on them, birthday cakes with clowns on them.
I mean, they do share something with the Harlequin in the exaggerated features. And the Harlequins had the long nose when they're masked. But then they took it even to the extremities, like the hands and feet.
Right.
Which was a new addition.
So those are the 4 types of clowns we're focusing on, and that'll give us a little bit of an idea of how to play those in games. So first let's look at how to play clowns as antagonists.
Which is probably the easiest way to incorporate them.
Right.
We can certainly see that people fear clowns, but how many people really aspire to be a clown?
Right, yeah, the phobia, colorophobia, the fear of clowns. Right.
Not a real phobia.
Right.
According to the World Health Organization.
So the fixed extreme expression of happiness or sadness, the extended feet and hands, the extreme human expression gets us into the uncanny valley. So people are seeing that as disturbing. It's familiar but not quite right.
Yeah, and psychologists also think that the antisocial behavior also disturbs us. We see them acting in ways that they shouldn't be acting.
Right. So as an antagonist, the first type of clown we want to look at is a psycho clown, the killer clown. So very often depicted in movies like, for example, Clown House.
The famous Clown
House. The famous Clown House,
They were expecting us to mention that one, yeah.
Where a group of escaped mental patients murder and take the place of clowns.
This is in the beginning. We're not spoiling
we're not spoiling. This is the first scene.
Yeah.
And so those become your killers, and they're still human, but they're in the guise of clowns.
Right. And the classic example of this, or another classic example, Clown House counts as the first, is the Joker from DC Comics.
Right.
Which is perhaps the most famous clown of all.
Yeah, and so the ability of these clowns to hide in plain sight, I think, is the most terrifying, or the easiest way to kind of introduce them into a situation. They're not uncommon, they're not unusual, but that entertaining or foolish persona can turn into an attacker or a monster.
Oh, absolutely. And that you would find them in places where you would see children. Like, you wouldn't blink to see them in a hospital.
Right.
Or, I probably would. Or seeing them at a children's birthday party, whether they were invited or not. Yeah.
Right.
Although last year people were a bit disturbed to see clowns just kind of turning up on the side of the road.
Yeah, that's right. A lot of Instagram photos of clowns waving from the woods.
Yeah. But that aspect of hiding in plain sight definitely makes it easy to work them into your game and have them as a genuine surprise.
Yes.
Yeah. Now our next antagonist is clowns as aliens, monsters, or demons. And we can see that done very well, actually, surprisingly well, in Killer Clowns from Outer Space. So I'm sure you can guess which one they were. Hint, it's the aliens. But here we see clowns as, of course, like killer clowns, but Killer Clowns from Outer Space, but as supernatural beings. And we can even see in a historical example, when we're talking about the Harlequins, as their origins coming from playing demons. And here what we can do is you can really have a lot of fun with the clown equipment and paraphernalia and their tricks. So what would a clown do, or a supernatural clown do, with shadow puppets, for example, or with balloon animals? Watch Killer Clowns from Outer Space and find out.
Yes.
Don't want to ruin those for you. But it really allows you to play with the idea of clowns, and you're not bound by things like physics or logic.
Right.
You can just really run with it.
And if you're using a demonic origin for this clown role, you could be something like a Pied Piper, someone that could enchant or possess people, and usually children, into doing their bidding or kind of joining their side. The next type of antagonist is the cult or army. So we saw that type of clown in the movie Stitches. So there was a cabal or a group of kind of
the juggalos.
yes, yes, of clowns that had some supernatural powers. They were able to resurrect the dead, and
Sure.
it was kind of a secret group, but they had a lot of power, and they were able to support their members.
Like really, clowns were part of this society.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
It was like a cabal. Yeah.
And one of the interesting kind of historical truths that they included in this movie, in kind of a supernatural way or an occultish way, is the egg registry. Yeah. So that was a tradition in London where a clown needed to paint the pattern or the design of their face makeup onto an egg to trademark or protect that design, so their character was registered with this egg registry.
Right. Yeah. So after the movie, we both researched it and got, hey, there actually is an egg registry.
Yes.
Or like they actually put clown faces on eggs, but it only goes back to about the 1940s.
Right.
And then it stopped, and then it was revived quite recently, maybe the 60s or 70s. And now they put them on porcelain eggs as opposed to real eggshells.
Right.
They didn't have those original eggs didn't
Keep
last
those
very
around,
long.
yeah.
So that's them as a cult. And you can even take something like not a clown movie, like The Warriors, and we see where you could take a group and use something like face paint or clown makeup, and it immediately makes that group seem more terrifying. And we're looking at the baseball fairies, who looked really cool, really badass. They were wearing baseball uniforms and kiss makeup or clown makeup.
Right.
You found out they weren't actually that tough. They were much weaker than the Warriors themselves. But just that look was so good, and it immediately allows you to give a very simple uniform. A uniform that can actually be changed up. So they could all have different colors on their face, but still, because they all had that face paint, you know they all belong to the same group.
Right.
And the baseball uniform.
Right.
Yes. In that particular example, yeah. And our next idea for antagonists originally came from the movie Clown. And that was clown as a curse. And again, we're not spoiling the movie, but right away the person puts on a cursed clown outfit and then can't take it off.
Right.
And they become more like a clown. Well, actually, they become more like a demonic clown. But that's a really interesting idea, is where something that we associate with clowns is cursed, and you become more like it. And as we were talking about it, we started to think about another idea, and that is clown as a virus and something that spreads. We look at things like the red nose and the white skin, and we associate that with like sickness, illness, like a cold or something that make you very pale. So why not have that spread? Now that could spread in a more mundane way, such as like just an airborne virus. You sneeze on somebody, or you can really play with that. Maybe it's the face paint that spreads the virus, or it could be, one of those like flowers where you spray the water, and it's like a waterborne virus, and that it spreads that way. And then when the person gets it, they become more and more like a clown.
Right. I think the latest edition of Warhammer 40K did an interesting job with their Nurgle poxwalkers. They're smiling and kind of ghastly happy, but they're, diseased inside and deformed, and would obviously be in agony, but it's ecstasy and laughter that you see on their faces.
No, that's a good example, and you can really contrast that with the movie Clown, where there you have a more tormented individual, where he's really fighting it, whereas with these poxwalkers, they are embracing it. And embracing it, and they just want to spread it to everybody. And in Clown, we also see another good example of what we call fake history. So Stitches kind of stretch the history, and Clown just breaks it. And I think you can do that with a clown, because everybody knows what a clown is, but they don't really know the background of the clown. So Clown the movie does a good idea of kind of taking elements of mythology that sound like they would make sense, and say this is actually the origins of the clowns. This is where we get their appearance, and this is why they like children.
And they use some pretty convincing medieval illustrations to show these clown demons. In
Props
history.
to the prop master, I guess. I just came up with that.
Nice.
So those are some ideas of how you can play clowns as antagonists. Let's look at the bigger challenge and how to play them as protagonists. And here we really rely on the clowns from history to give us our character types.
Right. So starting with the sacred clown, I think the class that makes the most sense would be the mystic. And someone that would perform maybe foolish or ridiculous looking rituals or kind of contrarian or backwards behavior to connect with the spirit world and give them their powers.
And because clowns can seem crazy to a lot of people, we often associate somebody who's like crazy or insane as having like a special insight. So you can certainly see this person being able to have special divination abilities or something like that.
Right.
Next up would be the diplomat. So a little bit more mundane, and here we rely on the jester historical example as someone who really had to walk the line. But they could go from, you know, the high society to low society quite easily. The challenge was not to get killed in either one, I suppose. So there you have somebody who could be your face. Not a traditional face like the handsome face, but definitely has a lot of charisma, a lot of ability to persuade people or deceive people.
And I think another flavor of the jester would be the masochist. So that could be a character class where if you...
looking in their dungeon, or the player's handbook going, where's the masochist? Yeah.
But a masochist role would be a character type that by receiving damage by receiving damage or some sort of jeopardy, that could buff the party. So kind of the opposite thinking, a kind of contrary way that you would play the character.
Oh yeah, the diplomat avoiding the damage.
And the masochist seeking it out. Or being pushed into the front of the party.
And it certainly wouldn't have to be fantasy. We can see a good example of like a masochist kind of in Speedball, like in comic books, where somebody who, you know, can take a lot of physical damage and they bounce around. So they have the acrobatics, which the jester did, and they would rely on getting that kinetic energy to get the power. Of course, they really ran with that masochist thing after Civil War, but I was thinking more pre-Civil War. And that brings us to the Avenger. So you don't want to avoid the damage or take the damage. You actually want to dish the damage out. And we use the Harlequin as our template here. And one thing when we did our research, we were really impressed by Warhammer 40K's version of the Harlequin, because we can definitely see its ties to the actual historical Harlequin. We're looking at the costume with the checkered pattern outfit, the masks that they wear, and also the fact that they travel in troops and work together. So that's great. But also we can see them like fighting an injustice, fighting an evil. They're chaos hunters.
Right. And I think another variation of that could be a supernatural or demonic version, which would be like a revenant. So someone that maybe had to conceal their decayed body with a mask and clothing, but you know, had a singular purpose of revenge or something that gave them their motivation.
Oh, absolutely, yeah.
And so to find a class that would work for the Auguste or the circus clown, we thought the rogue would be the most appropriate fit. I think your distracting tactics, your pratfalls could actually give you advantage in combat and seem ridiculous, but be very effective.
Now the roguish jokester is probably the most obvious example of how you can play a clown in a game, but it's also the most challenging. If the player isn't funny, then they're going to have a real challenge playing this type of clown.
Right, and keeping the party from getting annoyed.
Sure, absolutely. But here, you can really rely on the fact that the clowns themselves aren't really that funny. So all they got to do is just kind of commit to the ideas that they're a clown and using the clown equipment or the clown tricks, like, you know, the joy buzzer or the exaggerated hammer and the big floppy shoes. Something, maybe not everything, but some aspects of the clown and work that in. I mean, you can really respect the fact that they're role-playing.
So we hope this gives you some ideas about how to play clowns as antagonists and protagonists, and also a little bit of the historical context so you can kind of come up with your own ways to work clowns into your role-play campaigns.
And if you'd like to hear us talk more about clowns and how we came up with these ideas, please check the podcast below.
And if you'd like to see more of our videos, please subscribe to our channel, and we've got a lot more content for you to see, so please like or subscribe.
Bye.
Bye.